Hello there. I will start this video with a very important question, which is, do you know what utility is? Not just that, how would you know if something or someone is useful or is not useful? Please let me know in the comments below. And before you watch this video, I really would like to see your answer. It will be a great assessment of yourself, trust me. So before you continue watching this video, leave a comment down below with your answer. It will be really great. Okay, now that you wrote your reply to these questions, I would like to tell you that the question of utility and whether something or someone is useful is way more complicated than it seems. And in this video, you're going to have a much broader understanding of what that means and how that can be actually a very negative quality and word in general. And to do so, we're going to take Spengler's analysis of utility, which for him, well, utility meant that which was conducive to the happiness of the majority of people. And of course, this happiness of the majority of people really was leisure for everyone. In other words, utility were those things that in the end would basically free everyone from the burden of work, of wage slavery, right? And you might think, well, that's great. Oh my God, but that's what we want. We wouldn't want to work every day for the rest of our lives. It's great to free us from the burden of work. And of course, where would you put the burden of work then? You would put that in a machine, in automation, right? And that's what Spengler's is trying to tell us, that this is a mentality that is very present at his time, but right now in 2020, that's even more common to see in the rhetoric of many politicians, but especially in those people in the Silicon Valley, right? That's the main utopia, the main ideal that they put behind many of their actions. Is they say, well, if we automate everything, well, it will be literally in utopia. No one will have to work anymore. Machines will give us everything we need, and humanity will finally have time to enjoy themselves, right? That's the rhetoric, that's the narrative that we see more and more, and that's why Spengler is such an important author. However, I know that might seem strange for many of you. This idea of utility taking us to happiness of the majority and freeing us from work, it might seem really good, but for Spengler, is not so good. For him, it's an enjoyment of art that is very similar to bread and circus. I don't know if you guys have studied Roman history, but in the late periods of the Roman Empire, the time in which the Roman civilization was decadent, was basically falling apart, well, in those times, many politicians would bring the policy of bread and circus to the people, to the mass, to the crowd. They would give bread and circus as forms of enjoyment to take away the attention of the big societal problems that they were facing as means of distraction, right? And so Spengler telling us that for him, this ideal of utility is very similar to those of bread and circus. We make a very important parallel that many people nowadays would think that this is ridiculous, but when you read Spengler's book on the decline of the West, then it becomes clear that this indication that perhaps utility is a sign of decadence, well, then we take this matter a little bit more seriously. And Spengler is criticizing this ideal of utility this utopia where no one will ever have to work again because everything is automated. He is criticizing all of that, trying to warn us. He is giving us some hints of what's going to happen. And it happened, and it's happening right now in 2020 more than ever. He was a prophet because see what he says. He says that although these advancements in getting to that place where no one will ever have to work again, in terms of automating everything, although some progress would be made in those regards, well, what about the soul itself? He says, of the soul, not one word was discussed. And that's really important. It's prophetic because where we are right now in 2020 is a place where everyone has a smartphone. Even if you are a very poor person in the middle of Asia and China, you have a smartphone and you have access to a lot of knowledge, a lot of information that would be inaccessible to anyone in a different generation. But at the same rate that you have all of this power in your hand, a lot of people are lost. As he says, not one word was discussed about the soul. And right now, people are falling apart in terms of their soul. They don't know who they are anymore. If anything, they were dismantled. Using social media, some people don't have a sense of identity. They don't know their place in the world. They have no meaning in their lives. They are taken by a very strange, deep nihilism that takes them to a very difficult and dangerous spot in which they really go to the extreme of taking their own lives. And we see the rates of people doing that, of ending their own lives. It's insane. It's insane. How could it be? How could it be that with all of this progress, with all of these advancements towards this utopia of no one ever having to work again, so many people are taking their own lives? Something is wrong. And he is telling us the reason for all of this, right? Spengler is telling us the soul was disregarded. And that's a big problem. Not only that, Spengler, he's an admirer of techniques, of course, and inventors as a whole. And he says that, ironically, the people that want this utopia of humanity not having to work and putting all the burden in the machines, it's not the taste or the desire of the great inventors themselves, with few exceptions. No, it's the desire of the spectators of the great inventors, who themselves incapable of inventing anything or understanding anything. They just wish to be freed from their wage slavery, quote unquote, right? And so that's the root of the problem. It's not techniques themselves, it's not technology, it's what happened. And where does that take us? It takes us to the world we're living right now. I'm going to quote what Spengler says. He talks about having a place, a time where there's no more war, no more distinctions between races, peoples, states, or religions, no criminals or adventurers, no conflicts arising out of superiority and differences, no hate or vengeance anymore, but eternal comfort. And the word comfort is very important throughout the millennia. And that's where we're at right now. He gave us a glimpse of the postmodern state, where there is no future. And that's something even a Marxist, as Mark Fisher would describe, right? And he even goes further and talks about a proud skepticism that displaces the sentimentality of the last century. That would be the 18th, 19th century, And he says, we have learned that history is something that takes no notice whatever of our expectations. Again, a hint, a very important warning that everyone disregarded. If you are a modern academic, if you are a scholar from an Ivy League school, you're not able to interpret in this way we're doing right now. You would say that he's just a crazy guy, that he is not articulate or something like that. But it's not the way it happens. It's not the way it happens. He's being broad in the definitions of what he's trying to talk about, right? He talks about this permanent condition of humanity in a earthly paradise conceived in terms of the technical trends. But the realization of this utopia that many still have and still promulgate as if it's the best thing in the planet, well, the outcome of that would be disastrous in terms of our soul. It would be the extinction of difference. It would be, in other words, the extinction of life, of the human itself. And we see that there are some, not even intellectuals, but there are some authors with a lot of influence that are getting closer and closer to these, the final realization towards the extinction of any form of violence, any form of difference, any form of inequality, even in terms of Marxist authors, but also you have people like Michael Aquino, right? Michael Aquino, which apart from being a well-known Satanist and the founder of the Temple of Set, he wrote a book that is really good, which is called Mind War, in which he gives a glimpse of a different framework by which war wouldn't be fought physically. Rather than that, you would focus on the mind war aspect of it, mainly psychological operations and bringing neurochemicals and all these different forms of control, of predicting threats of people that are dissidents, that could be a problem, and so on and so forth. And I think that's where we're going at more and more, using the machine itself to extinguish any form of violence, any form of chaos, any form of difference, any form of life in a way. That's the point where we're going to get at. If we do get to the point where we merge with this utopia that no one ever has to work again, I would bet that it would mean also the end of human life, of the human element of what we have. And no soul would be found whatsoever other than an algorithmic repetition that no longer lives but only mechanically repeats. And of course, it's just my speculation on this part, but that's it. Talking about utility, calling someone useful or not useful, useless, right? It's more complicated than it seems. And when you use these words, think about them. Don't just use these words thinking that, oh, yeah, I'm useless, I'm useful, this is useful, this is useless. No, think about what those words mean. For example, if you're calling an object useless, well, you in a way, it means that it won't lead to this utopia that Spengler is talking about. But is that really bad? Is an object, is an idea which is deemed useless essentially bad, essentially evil? Not necessarily, right? Something may be useless in terms of making money, in terms of giving you material resources, but it might be a medicine for your soul. And that's my goal with this channel and everything else in my life. If we don't think like that, we will slowly turn into mechanic, lifeless robots. Other than that, I hope you all have a great day, and I see you in the next video.